theme for October in our worship and in our activities has been and will continue to be justice. And the Westminster Dictionary of Theological Terms defines justice as the concept of each person receiving what is due. And then that dictionary goes on to note under justice that biblically the emphasis is on right relationships and persons receiving a share of the resources of society. Concern is expressed for the oppressed and the right treatment. Justice is related to love and grace. It's the end quote. When Jesus told today's story about the widow and the unjust judge, Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible was law. Torah requires judges and everyone else to respect God, and injustice is the opposite of respect for God. You see, righteous judgment on the part of a judge is mandated by Torah. So judges in Jesus' day were supposed to not only respect God, but other people. Judges were to listen to the one wronged and not ignore the supplication of the fatherless or the widow when she pours out her story. And given all of that, we can understand the judge in Jesus' parable as the very opposite of what a judge is supposed to be. He doesn't follow the law. He's disrespectful. He's not doing his job, not caring about God or people or justice. People don't get justice in his courtroom. The listeners of Jesus back in the day would have understood the judge was unjust and violating biblical laws. One commentator put it like this, quote, "The parable of the unjust judge reflects a world of bribes and brutality, a world of injustice for the poor, or at least justice delayed or gained only by force, which is injustice too." End quote. Jesus is a great storyteller. An unjust judge is a caricature of bad judges and a metaphor for the unjust justice system of Rome, for which that judge was a stooge. The unjust judge, as Jesus tells us, a foil to the poor widow who finds a way to win in a system that is predisposed against her. She may be nobody to the culture and powers to be, but she's wily and so annoyingly persistent that the unjust judge gives up, and he gives her justice. Not because he wants to be right, but because she's worn him down. In other words, the judge has to do what's right, so she'll go away. He said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." To put it in the vernacular, the widow wins by driving the judge nuts. And it's meant to be funny that a cultural nobody, lowest of the low, female widow bests a big, powerful, elite judge. Rome's stooge is afraid of a little old woman. The serious side is justice gets dispensed. The widow gets her due. And one way to hear this parable is obvious that if a ruthless, unjust judge will respond to persistent petitions, surely our good and loving God will. And Jesus says as much in the story as it's recorded in verses 6 to 8. Listen to what the unjust judge says. "And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them." So, for sure, one way to hear this is persistent prayers get answered. But there's another lesson we might overlook. Gospel stories have layers of meaning. And that other lesson is that God's voice is in those calling out for justice. And justice will be provided. Listen again. You can hear Jesus saying just that. Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. See, parable is more than just about one outcast of one culture pestering one judge until he breaks down and nets out justice to one person. On a cosmic justice scale, we can hear the lowly widow as the voice of God, demanding justice from corrupt earthly powers. It's God's power working in history in every woman and every man of the world. Not even those who wield earthly powers without regard to justice can stop God's never-ending call for the granting of justice. What is due? Often earthly powers do not want to do what is just, but the heartbeat of God, thumping of justice in the voices of God's agents has a great track record of wearing them down. It takes time and persistence, but what is due will come. No petty, power-mongering, people-loathing judge or other power elite can stop that. And there's great hope in that. And it's not just hypothetical. We can see in history that it's true. Little voices of cultural nobodies have spoken God's truth to the powerful relentlessly. And the powerful have tried to ignore them and evade justice, but they cave in at the end and they say, I will grant justice so that they may not wear me down. Pestering the powerful has led to God's justice being granted with respect to many things. So many humanity gets closer and closer to a world where one day all could have their due. But we are not there by a long shot, but we are a heck of a lot closer than we were when Jesus first told the parable that we're looking at. The people of God have ceaselessly pestered worldly powers for justice. And when people do so, they are God's voice. And God is always, ultimately victorious. Even in downtrodden widows, God speaks. And God succeeds. Even in downtrodden slaves, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden women, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden poor, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden refugees, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden people of color, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden religious minorities, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden disabled people, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in downtrodden LGBTQ plus people, God speaks and God succeeds. Even in us, God speaks and God succeeds. Worldly powers have long held too little respect for humans and too little respect for God and too little respect for justice and what is due. But like the poor widow in today's lesson, God doesn't give up. Through tenacity, persistence in the voice of God's children, history proves that justice will out. Justice will be provided. What God wants due to all will be given. And that might